I remember the exact moment I realized my children were no longer looking at me as their mother, but as a bank account with a pulse. It was October 2022, in a quiet suburb outside Portland. I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of lukewarm tea and an envelope from my lawyer. It was a Thursday, late afternoon, the kind of gray that makes the whole house feel smaller. My son, Daniel, had called that morning to check on me, but spent 12 minutes talking about property prices. My daughter, Melissa, texted a link to a retirement home just in case. They had been fighting over my so-called fortune for years now, whispering, comparing, keeping score. What they didn't know, and what I was finally ready to say out loud, was that I emptied the chessboard 5 years ago. Reading next week won't make them rich. It might, if we were lucky, make them honest. Let me tell you how I got here. Let me tell you who I really am. Because my children, even now, don't really know me at all. Evelyn Park had lived in the same two-story house for 27 years. It was a beige box with too many hydrangeas out front and a driveway that always needed patching. The neighborhood was the kind where people waved from their cars but didn't stop to talk. Modest homes, small yards, chain-link fences. Working-class families who had bought in the 80s and 90s, before Portland became expensive, before the tech companies moved in and property values started climbing like ivy up a wall. She liked it that way. Quiet. Predictable. Safe. Her husband, Robert, had died on June 2017. It was the summer after their 35th wedding anniversary. They'd celebrated quietly, just the two of them, at a Korean restaurant downtown where the owner remembered their names. Robert had ordered the same thing he always ordered, galbi and rice, extra banchan. Evelyn had the seafood pancake. They'd shared a bottle of soju and walked home slowly through streets still warm from the afternoon sun. 3 weeks later, Robert complained about indigestion. He took antacids. He went to bed early. Evelyn found him the next morning, already cold, his reading glasses still folded on the nightstand. The doctor said it was quick. A massive coronary event. He probably didn't feel much. Evelyn wasn't sure if that was supposed to be a comfort. The funeral was small. Robert had outlived most of his college friends and kept few connections from work. He'd been an engineer at a paper mill for 33 years, the kind of steady, invisible work that kept the bills paid but didn't make for interesting stories. He'd retired at 62 with a modest pension and the satisfaction of a life lived without drama. There were maybe 30 people in the chapel. Half of them were neighbors who came out of politeness. Evelyn sat in the front row, flanked by her 2 children. Daniel on her left, Melissa on her right. Both of them were dressed in black. Both of them are quiet. Daniel was 41 years old. He'd flown in from Seattle the day before, direct flight, rental car, 1 small suitcase. He was a project manager at a tech company whose name changed every few years through mergers and acquisitions. He was married to a woman named Ashley who worked in marketing. They had 2 children, Sophia, 9, and Lucas, 6. They lived in a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs with a 2-car garage and a yard that sloped down toward a creek. Daniel had always been ambitious. Even as a child, he'd calculated everything. How many A's he needed for the honor roll. How many hours of practice to make the basketball team. How much money he'd need to retire by 50. He'd gotten his degree in business administration, landed his first job at 23, and moved up steadily. He made good money. Low 6 figures, maybe more. But it never seemed like enough. There were always bigger houses, better schools, nicer vacations just out of reach. Melissa was 38. She lived closer, just across town in a 3-bedroom townhouse with gray walls and white furniture that looked like it belonged in a catalog. She was an HR director at a mid-size pharmaceutical company. She'd been married to a man named Greg, but they'd divorced 2 years earlier. It had been quiet, civilized, expensive. They shared custody of their son, Ethan, who was 10 and spent weekends shuttling between households with a small backpack and a resigned expression. Melissa had always been the organized one. The planner. The one who color-coded her school notebooks and kept detailed calendars. She'd studied psychology and business, thinking she'd work in counseling, but ended up in corporate HR instead. Managing people, mediating conflicts, writing performance reviews. She was good at it. Efficient. Professional. But somewhere along the way, she'd started treating her personal life like a series of problems to solve and relationships like org charts to optimize. The funeral flowers arrived in waves. Lilies and roses and arrangements Evelyn didn't recognize. They lined the dining room table, the kitchen counter, the narrow hallway leading to the stairs. The house smelled like a greenhouse, sweet and heavy, the kind of scent that sticks to your clothes and follows you into every room. Daniel stayed for 4 days. Melissa came over every morning and left every evening. They helped sort through Robert's things. They cleaned out his closet, packed his clothes into boxes for donation, threw away expired medications, and organized paperwork. They were efficient, methodical, almost businesslike. Evelyn watched them work and felt grateful for the help, but also strangely distant, as if she were watching actors play the role of grieving children rather than experiencing the real thing. The day after the funeral, Evelyn woke up to an empty house. Daniel had gone back to the hotel where he was staying. Melissa hadn't arrived yet. The flowers were still there, but the people were gone. She made coffee in the same pot she and Robert had used for 20 years, the one with the crack in the handle that neither of them ever got around to replacing. She sat at the kitchen table and looked out at the backyard. The grass needed mowing. Robert used to do that on Saturday mornings, wearing his old baseball cap and listening to talk radio on a transistor he kept in the garage. She didn't cry. She had already done that. In the hospital, when they'd told her. In the car on the way home, gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. In the shower, where the water could wash away the evidence. Now there was just a dull ache, like a bruise that hadn't fully formed yet. An absence where Robert used to be. Around 10 in the morning, Daniel knocked on the door and let himself in with the spare key he still had from high school. "Morning, Mom," he said, setting his phone on the counter. "Morning. How'd you sleep?" "Enough." He nodded, opened the fridge, took out a carton of orange juice, and poured himself a glass without asking. He leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone with one hand, the glass balanced in the other. "We should probably talk," he said, not looking up. Evelyn set her mug down carefully. The coffee was lukewarm, but she'd stopped tasting it anyway. "About what?" "The house. Dad's accounts. You know, planning ahead." There it was. The shift. The turn in the conversation she'd been half expecting, but still wasn't ready to hear. "We just buried your father," she said quietly. "Let's give it a week." "I know," he said, finally looking up from his phone. "I'm not trying to be insensitive. I just think it's smart to start thinking about things now. Before it gets complicated." "Complicated how?" "You know. Estate stuff. Taxes. Probate. You're alone now. This house is big. You might not want to deal with all this by yourself." Evelyn looked at her son. He was wearing expensive jeans and a fitted button-down shirt. His hair was trimmed short, neat. He looked successful. Confidence. Like someone who'd figured out all the angles. "I'll manage," she said. Daniel nodded slowly, finished his juice, and set the glass in the sink without rinsing it. The orange residue clung to the bottom. "Just saying," he added. "We're here to help." The word help hung in the air between them. An hour later, Melissa arrived. She brought a casserole in a glass dish covered with aluminum foil. Chicken and rice with vegetables, probably made the night before. She set it on the counter next to the wilting flowers and gave Evelyn a brief, careful hug. "I made this last night," Melissa said. "You can freeze it if you want." "Thank you. Have you eaten today?" "Some toast." "You should eat more. You need your strength." They sat in the living room. The recliner where Robert used to fall asleep with the news humming was still positioned toward the TV. No one sat in it. The cushions still held the shape of his body, a shallow depression in the worn fabric. Evelyn took the couch. Melissa sat in the armchair by the window, crossing her legs neatly, her hands folded in her lap. "Have you thought about what comes next?" Melissa asked. Her voice was soft, measured, and professional. She spoke the way she probably spoke to employees during performance reviews or difficult conversations. "Not really," Evelyn said. "That's okay. There's no rush. But eventually, you'll need to figure out things like the will, who the executor is, whether Dad had life insurance that needs to be claimed. Evelyn looked at her daughter. Melissa's hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Her nails were painted a pale, neutral pink. She wore minimal makeup, just enough to look polished. She looked composed, put together, like someone who had her life organized into neat, manageable categories. "Who did Dad name as executor?" Melissa asked. "Me," Evelyn said. "And after you?" "I'm not sure. I'd have to check the documents." Melissa nodded slowly, processing this information like data points in a spreadsheet. "You should. It's important to know. And the life insurance, has that been claimed yet? Has the company reached out?" Evelyn felt something shift inside her, subtle but distinct. Like a door closing softly in a distant room. "I don't know," she said. "I haven't looked into it yet." "You should," Melissa said, leaning forward slightly. "Those things can take time to process, and you'll need the money for ongoing expenses. Utilities, property taxes, food. It adds up." "I know it adds up. I've been paying bills for 35 years. "I know, Mom. I'm just trying to help." There was that word again. Help. Daniel came into the room then, phone still in hand, the screen glowing. He'd been in the kitchen, half listening, half scrolling through whatever feeds occupied his attention. "We're not trying to pressure you," he said, looking up. "We just want to make sure you're okay. That you're taken care of." Evelyn heard the word "we" and felt the tightness in her chest intensify. When did they become a united front? When did they start speaking in plural? "I appreciate that," she said carefully. They stayed for another hour. Melissa asked about utility bills, whether Evelyn needed help sorting through Robert's clothes, whether she was still comfortable driving at night. Daniel mentioned something about property values in the neighborhood, how the market was strong right now, how houses were selling quickly, how it might be worth getting an appraisal just to have a sense of where things stood. "Not to sell," he added quickly. "Just to know. Information is power, right?" Evelyn nodded at all the right moments. She said she'd think about it. She said she appreciated their concern. She walked them to the door and waved as they drove away in their separate cars, back to their separate lives. Then she went back inside, locked the door, and stood in the quiet hallway for a long moment. The casserole sat on the counter, cooling. The flowers drooped in their vases. The house smelled like moss and lilies. She went to the kitchen table and sat down in the same chair she'd occupied every morning for 27 years. The chair that faced the window. The chair where she used to watch Robert move around the yard, trimming hedges, pulling weeds, standing with his hands on his hips surveying his modest domain. She thought about the conversation. About the questions that weren't really questions. About the way Daniel had mentioned the house as if it were a stock portfolio. About the way Melissa had asked about insurance like she was ticking off items on a project management checklist. She thought about the word "we." That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around her. Every creak of the floorboards. Every whisper of wind against the windows. Robert's side of the bed was cold and empty. His reading glasses were still on the nightstand, exactly where he'd left them. She hadn't moved them, hadn't touched them, as if leaving them there might somehow preserve a piece of him. Around 2 in the morning, she gave up on sleep. She went downstairs in her robe and sat in the dark living room, the street lamp outside casting long shadows across the walls. A car passed every few minutes, headlights sliding like searchlights across the ceiling. She thought about Robert. About the life they'd built together, slowly, carefully, without drama or spectacle. 2 immigrants from South Korea who'd met in night school while learning English. Who'd worked multiple jobs to save for a down payment. Who'd bought this house in 1990 with a 30-year mortgage that felt impossible at the time. Who'd paid it off in 23 years by sacrificing vacations, new cars, restaurant meals, everything that wasn't essential. She thought about Daniel and Melissa as children. How they'd shared a bedroom until Daniel was 12. How they'd worn hand-me-down clothes and played with toys from garage sales. How they'd never seemed to lack for anything because Evelyn and Robert made sure they didn't. How they'd both gone to college on a combination of scholarships, loans, and parental contributions that left Evelyn and Robert eating ramen for weeks. She thought about the look in their eyes earlier. Not grief. Not quite. Something else. Something calculating. By the time the sun came up, Evelyn had made a decision. She didn't know exactly what it looked like yet, but she knew she needed to understand her own situation completely before anyone else started making plans around it. She went to her bedroom, opened the bottom drawer of her dresser, and pulled out the blue accordion folder where she and Robert had kept their important papers. Birth certificates, social security cards, the deed to the house, tax returns, life insurance policies, investment statements. She spread everything out on the bed and started reading. Really reading. Line by line, number by number. By mid-morning, she had a clearer picture, and it both reassured and unsettled her. The house was fully paid off. According to the most recent property tax assessment, it was worth approximately $460,000. Maybe more in the current market, maybe less. But that was the baseline. Robert's life insurance policy would pay out $350,000. He'd kept that policy for 32 years, paying the premiums every month without fail, even when money was tight. It was a simple term life policy, no bells and whistles, just a lump sum to protect his family if something happened to him. Their joint savings account had $62,417. Not a fortune, but more than many people their age had managed to set aside. Their brokerage account, built slowly over 30 years through automatic monthly contributions of $200, had grown to $412,800. They'd never touched it, never borrowed against it. Just let it sit and compound, year after year, through bull markets and bear markets and everything in between. Evelyn's pension from 29 years as an accountant at a mid-size firm would continue paying $2,800 per month for the rest of her life. Robert's smaller pension from the paper mill had ended with his death. It hadn't included a survivor benefit, but that's why they'd kept the life insurance. On paper, adding it all up, it looked like a significant amount. Over $1 million when you counted the house. To her children, it probably looked like a windfall. A nest egg. An inheritance worth positioning for. To Evelyn, it looked like 3 decades of sacrifice. Every coupon clipped. Every vacation declined. Every dinner cooked at home instead of ordered out. Every decision to fix the car instead of replacing it, to patch the roof instead of renovating, to save instead of spend. It didn't look like an inheritance. It looked like survival. Insurance against old age, medical bills, nursing care, the 1,000 small catastrophes that could drain a bank account in months. She put the papers back in the folder, closed it carefully, and slid it back into the drawer beneath her winter sweaters. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and thought about what came next. The next day, she called the hospice where Robert had spent his last 3 days. It was a small facility on the east side, warm and quiet, staffed by nurses who moved with the slow gentleness of people who understood grief. She asked to speak to Patricia, the social worker who had helped them with paperwork in those final hours. Patricia remembered her. "Mrs. Park. How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," Evelyn said. "I need a recommendation. For a lawyer." "What kind of lawyer?" "Estate planning. Someone who can help me understand what I have and what I should do with it. Someone who won't talk down to me." Patricia didn't ask why. She didn't pry. She just said she'd send over a name. 2 days later, Evelyn received an email, her first email since Robert died, the inbox cluttered with sympathy messages she hadn't had the energy to answer. The message from Patricia contained contact information for a woman named Priya Desai, estate attorney, specialized in late-life planning, charitable trusts, family dynamics. The message said she was thorough, patient, and good at listening. Evelyn wrote down the number on a scrap of paper torn from the edge of a grocery list. She placed it inside the blue folder, tucked between the life insurance policy and the deed to the house. Then she opened her paper calendar, the kind with actual pages, not a phone app, and found a blank space in August. She wrote Priya's name in careful block letters and circled the date, August 15th. Then she underlined it twice. She wasn't sure yet what she was planning. But she knew she needed information. Clarity. Options. And she needed them before anyone else started making assumptions about what she should do. By autumn, the funeral flowers were long gone, the sympathy cards filed away, and life had settled into a new rhythm. A rhythm without Robert. A rhythm of quiet mornings, long afternoons, early bedtimes. A rhythm of phone calls and visits that followed a predictable pattern. Daniel called every Tuesday evening, usually around 6:30, right as Evelyn was finishing dinner. She could hear it in the background, the sound of his car, traffic humming, the occasional honk. He was calling during his commute, fitting her into the space between work and home. The conversations lasted 10 to 15 minutes. Always the same structure. "How are you doing, Mom?" "Fine." "Sleeping okay?" "Mostly." "Eating enough?" "Yes." Then he'd talk about his own life. Work projects. Traffic patterns. Sophia's soccer league. Lucas's struggles with reading. Ashley's new promotion. The weather in Seattle. The price of gas. All surface level, safe, the kind of conversation you could have with anyone. And then, near the end of every call, he'd slip in a question. Casual. Curious. Concerned. "You manage the bills okay?" "Yes." "How's holding up?" "So far." "You ever think about downsizing?" "I mean, that's a lot of space for one person." Evelyn would pause just long enough to make him uncomfortable. "Not yet. I'm just saying, you don't need all those bedrooms anymore. You could sell, move into a condo, free up some equity. Make your life easier." "I like it here." "I know, but I'm managing, Daniel." "Okay. Just wanted to check." Every Tuesday. The same script. The same gentle pressure. Melissa visited every other Saturday, arriving around 10 in the morning with reusable shopping bags full of groceries Evelyn hadn't asked for. Organic vegetables. Expensive coffee. Greek yogurt. Gluten-free bread that tasted like cardboard. Almond milk even though Evelyn had never been lactose intolerant. "I was at the store anyway," Melissa would say, unpacking the bags. "Thought I'd grab you a few things." She'd stay for an hour, maybe two, helping with small tasks. Folding laundry. Wiping down counters. Sorting mail into piles, bills, junk, things to keep. She moved through the house efficiently, like someone conducting an inspection. And always, woven into the ordinary conversation, came the questions. "How's your blood pressure been?" "Fine." "When's your next doctor's appointment?" "Next month." "Still driving at night?" "When I need to." Melissa would nod, filing away the information. "You should be careful. Vision changes after 60. Reflexes slow down. You don't want to put yourself at risk." "I've been driving for 40 years. "I know, Mom. I'm just looking out for you." The pattern was consistent. Every visit. Every phone call. Questions that seemed like care but felt like surveillance. "How are you sleeping? How are your knees? Are you taking your medications? Do you need help with anything? Can I set up automatic bill pay for you? Have you thought about getting a medical alert system?" Evelyn noticed the shift in language too. They stopped asking about her day and started asking about her capacity. They stopped asking what she wanted and started suggesting what she needed. And they asked about each other. "Has Daniel been checking in?" Melissa would ask, casual, while organizing Evelyn's pantry. "He calls Tuesdays." "What do you talk about?" "Nothing much. Work. The grandkids." "Does he mention anything about the house?" "Why would he?" Melissa would shrug. "No reason. Just curious." The same thing happened with Daniel. "How's Melissa doing?" he'd ask, his voice tinny through the car speakers. "She's fine." "She coming by regularly?" "Every couple weeks." "She talk to you about finances?" "About planning ahead." "Sometimes." "What does she say?" "That I should think about the future." "Do you?" "Daniel, I'm 63, not 90. "I know. I'm just making sure you're covered." They were coordinating. Not overtly, but around the edges, checking in on each other's check-ins, making sure they both knew what the other knew. One Tuesday evening in late September, Daniel called while Evelyn was washing dishes. She dried her hands on a dish towel and answered, tucking the phone between her ear and shoulder while she put away plates. "Hey, Mom." "Hi. How was your day?" "Quiet." "That's good. Listen, I've been thinking. You've got a lot of equity sitting in that house. Have you ever thought about unlocking some of it?" You could set up a home equity line of credit or even do a reverse mortgage. It could give you more flexibility. Evelyn stopped putting away dishes. She set a plate down carefully in the cupboard. Flexibility for what? You know, whatever you need. Medical expenses, travel, home improvements. Or you could even help us out a little. The kids' private school tuition is brutal. $28,000 a year, each kid. And Ashley's student loans are still hanging over us. I thought you were doing well. We are. But everyone could use a little cushion. You've got all this equity just sitting there. It's not doing anything. You could put it to work. Help your family. It'd be a win-win. Evelyn looked out the kitchen window at the darkening street. The leaves on the maple tree were starting to turn. She heard the phrase win-win and felt something inside her tighten. I'm managing fine, she said. I like keeping things simple. Daniel laughed, but it didn't sound amused. It sounded frustrating. No one retires on simple anymore, Mom. You've got to make your money work for you. That's what Dad would have wanted. Your father wanted me to be secure. That's different from being useful to everyone else. There was a pause. Evelyn could hear the hum of traffic, the radio playing faintly in the background. I'm not trying to pressure you, Daniel said, his voice tighter now. I'm trying to help you think strategically. I don't need strategy. I need stability. Okay, he said. Fine. We'll talk later. I have to go. Sophia needs help with her homework. All right. Talk soon, Mom. Bye, Daniel. She hung up and stood in the quiet kitchen for a long time, the dish towel still in her hands. The following Saturday, Melissa invited Evelyn over for dinner. Not at Evelyn's house, at Melissa's townhouse, the one with the gray walls and white furniture that always made Evelyn feel like she might stain something just by sitting down. Evelyn drove over around 6. The townhouse was in a newer development on the west side, all identical buildings arranged around a central courtyard with a fountain that was turned off more often than not. Melissa's unit was on the ground floor. Clean, modern, expensive-looking. They ate salmon and roasted vegetables at a glass table that showed every fingerprint. Melissa talked about work, a difficult employee she was managing through a performance improvement plan, the politics of the upcoming reorganization, her boss's unrealistic expectations. Ethan was at his father's for the weekend, so it was just the two of them. The conversation felt formal, like a business dinner. Halfway through the meal, Melissa stood up and returned with an iPad. She tapped the screen a few times, then slid it across the table toward Evelyn. I've been doing some research, Melissa said. Assisted living communities. I know you're not ready to think about it yet, but these places have wait lists. Some of them are 2, 3 years long. You have to plan ahead. Evelyn looked at the screen. There were photos of bright hallways, smiling staff in scrubs, elderly people playing cards at round tables, a man and woman walking arm in arm through a garden. Below the photos were tabs, amenities, pricing, availability, location. She tapped on pricing. A spreadsheet opened. Monthly fees ranging from $4,000 to $8,000. Entry fees ranging from $50,000 to $200,000. And further down, a section labeled Financial Planning Scenarios, there were calculations. Estimated sale prices for homes in Evelyn's neighborhood. Projected returns on investment if the proceeds were properly managed. Distribution scenarios showing how the funds could be allocated, a phrase that made Evelyn's stomach turn. Already putting me in a home? Evelyn asked. She tried to make it sound light, a joke, but it came out flatter than she intended. It's not like that, Mom. Your house is big. You're alone. If something happened, a fall, a medical emergency, no one would know for hours. Days maybe. This way, you'd have people around 24/7. You'd be safe. And you could sell the house, take that equity, and put it somewhere it's actually working for you. Generating income. Building value. We could help you manage it. Evelyn noticed the phrase, we could help you manage it. The royal we. The united front. You've put a lot of work into this, Evelyn said, her voice neutral. I just want you to be prepared. To have options. Evelyn slid the iPad back across the table, the glass making a soft scraping sound. I'm not ready to think about this yet. Melissa's jaw tightened, just slightly. A muscle flexing near her ear. You should be. The good places fill up fast. And if you wait until you actually need it, you won't have any choice. You'll end up wherever has an open bed. I'll keep that in mind. Mom. Melissa, I appreciate the research. But I'm not ready. They finished the meal in near silence. The salmon was good, but Evelyn couldn't taste it. When she left, Melissa hugged her at the door, but it felt stiff, transactional, like a handshake disguised as affection. Evelyn drove home through dark streets and felt the exhaustion settle deeper. Not from age. From being watched. Measured. Evaluated. Over the next few months, the questions intensified. They became more pointed. More frequent. More coordinated. In October, Daniel called to ask if she'd made any changes to her will. Not yet. You should. Especially now that Dad's gone. You need to make sure everything's clear. It's clear enough. Have you thought about who the executor should be? It should probably be one of us. We know your situation. I'll think about it. Don't wait too long, Mom. These things matter. In November, Melissa texted a series of articles. Each one had a headline designed to provoke anxiety. Seniors lose $3 billion annually to financial scams. Elderly woman loses home to contractor fraud. Study. Cognitive decline begins earlier than expected. With each article came a message. Just FYI. Thought you should see this. Stay safe out there. They both asked, separately, about power of attorney. Daniel brought it up during a Tuesday evening call. You should really have someone with power of attorney. Just in case something happens. A stroke, a fall, anything. You don't want to be in the hospital unable to access your accounts or make decisions. I'll think about it. It should probably be me. I handle complex finances at work. I know how to navigate this stuff. Melissa brought it up during a Saturday visit. We should set up a power of attorney. It's standard. It doesn't take any control away from you. It just means someone can help if you need it. Who did you have in mind? Me. I deal with legal documents all day at work. I know how to handle sensitive situations. They were competing. Gently. Politely. But unmistakably. Evelyn said she'd think about it. She said it to both of them. Then she stopped answering certain questions altogether. When they asked about her accounts, she said, stable. When they asked about the house, she said, it's fine. When they asked about her plans, she said, we'll see. She noticed how they talked about other people too. At Thanksgiving dinner at Melissa's townhouse, a tense, formal affair with store-bought rolls and Ethan glued to his phone, the conversation turned to a coworker of Melissa's. Her father finally signed over their family cabin, Melissa said, passing the green beans. It's smart, actually. He's still alive, but now she and her brother get to use it without fighting over it later. And it avoids all the estate tax complications. Daniel nodded, cutting his turkey with more force than necessary. Ashley's parents are sitting on a fully paid-off house in Tacoma and won't help us with a down payment for a bigger place. They say they need it for security. But they're 70. How much security do they need? They could at least loan us some equity. Evelyn listened and said nothing. She thought about the word security and how its meaning changed depending on who is speaking. She thought about the word help and how it had started to sound like demand. By Christmas, she had stopped mentioning numbers entirely. No talk of Robert's insurance payout. No mention of her brokerage account. No discussion of property values. When they asked how things were looking financially, she just said enough. It wasn't a lie. It was strategic vagueness. And every time they pushed, every time they asked, every time they suggested, Evelyn made a note of it. Not on paper yet. Just mentally. Filing it away. Building a record. One evening in late December, her neighbor Linda stopped by with a loaf of banana bread wrapped in aluminum foil. Linda was 59, a retired nurse who lived alone in the house next door with a small terrier named Biscuit. She'd lost her husband to cancer 8 years earlier and had met Evelyn at a grief support group the year before. They sat at Evelyn's kitchen table, drinking tea from mismatched mugs, the banana bread untouched between them. How are the kids? Linda asked, her voice gentle but knowing. Evelyn shrugged. Concerned. About you or about the house? Evelyn looked up. Linda was smiling, but her eyes were serious. Both, Evelyn said. Mostly the house. Linda nodded slowly, wrapping both hands around her mug. My sister went through something similar. Her kids started circling before she even turned 60, asking about her will, suggesting she simplify her finances, offering to help manage things. She finally moved most of her assets into a trust for her grandkids and left the kids out entirely. Did they speak to her after that? Eventually. It took a few years. There were some hard Christmases, but she said it was worth it. She got to live the last decade of her life on her own terms, without feeling like a walking ATM. Evelyn wrapped her hands around her own mug, feeling the warmth seep into her palms. I don't want to cut them out. I just don't want them treating me like I'm already gone. Then show them you're still here, Linda said firmly. Write it down. All of it. What they say. When they say it. How often? People forget their own words. But paper doesn't forget. That night, after Linda left, Evelyn went to the kitchen drawer where she kept miscellaneous items, rubber bands, expired coupons, pens that didn't work, takeout menus from restaurants that had closed. She pulled out a small black notebook she'd bought years ago but never used. It had no lines, just blank pages. She opened it to the first page and wrote the date at the top in careful, precise numbers. Then she started listing things. Not as accusations. Just as records. September 9th, Daniel called. Asked about unlocking home equity. Said it would be win-win. Mentioned his kids' private school tuition costs. October 7th, Melissa visited. Brought iPad with assisted living research. Had highlighted sale prices for houses in my neighborhood. Had calculated distribution scenarios. November 3rd, Daniel asked who should be executor of will. Suggested himself. Emphasized his finance experience. November 10th, Melissa asked about power of attorney. Suggested herself. Said it wouldn't take control away from me. November 23rd, Thanksgiving at Melissa's. Both discussed other people who had finally made smart estate decisions. Daniel complained about his in-laws hoarding assets. Melissa praised a coworker whose father signed over property early. December 2nd, Daniel sent 3 articles about seniors being scammed. Subject line each time, just FYI. She kept the notebook in the same drawer, tucked under a stack of old grocery lists and takeout menus. She didn't know yet what she'd do with it. But Linda was right. Paper didn't forget the paper. And Evelyn wanted to remember everything. The proof arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in March, delivered not by intention but by accident. It was gray outside, the kind of Portland gray that makes everything look washed out, muted, drained of color. Evelyn was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a crossword puzzle from the newspaper, not really trying to solve it, just filling in words to pass the time. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it. A new email from Melissa. She picked up the phone, unlocked it, opened her email app. The subject line read, Mom/House/Timing. Evelyn frowned. The message itself was blank. Just a subject line and a series of forwarded messages below it, arranged in reverse chronological order. She scrolled down, confused at first, then increasingly focused as she realized what she was looking at. It was an email thread. Between Melissa and Daniel. A week old. Messages she was never meant to see. She started reading from the beginning. From Daniel Park. To Melissa Park. Date, March 7th, 11:42 a.m. Subject, Mom. We should align on this. If she sells now, we can both benefit. You know my situation with the kids' school. $28K per kid per year is killing us. Ashley's parents aren't helping. If Mom could free up some of that equity, it would make a huge difference for our family. I know you could use it too. From Melissa Park. To Daniel Park. Date, March 7th, 2:14 p.m. Mom. I get that, but she's not ready. She's still grieving, still adjusting. We may have to wait until she can't manage the house on her own anymore. Her doctor mentioned her knee is worsening, arthritis, limited mobility. Give it another year, maybe 2. Don't push too soon or she'll dig in. From Daniel Park. To Melissa Park. Date, March 8th, 9:03 a.m. Mom. How long are we talking realistically? A year? 2 years? I need to plan around this. Our equity is completely tied up. We're house poor right now. I thought maybe she'd downsize on her own after Dad died, but she's being stubborn. From Melissa Park to Daniel Park. Date, March 8th, 11:27 a.m. Mom. Hard to say. Could be a year. Could be longer. But when it happens, we need to be on the same page about how to handle the estate. No fighting. No complications. We split everything 50-50 agreed. From Daniel Park to Melissa Park. Date, March 8th, 3:41 p.m. Mom. Agreed on the split. But if we can nudge her towards selling sooner rather than later, that's better for both of us. My situation is actually urgent. School tuition is due in August. I'm stretched thin. From Melissa Park to Daniel Park. Date, March 9th, 10:18 a.m. Mom. I'm working on it. I'm going to bring up the power of attorney again next time I see her. Frame it as reducing stress for her, making things easier, protecting her from scams. If you back me up on that, she'll be less suspicious. Once we have POA, we can start moving things in the right direction without her having to make all the decisions. She's overwhelmed. She just doesn't realize it yet. Evelyn set the phone down on the table. Her hands were steady, but her chest felt tight, like something was pressing against her ribs from the inside. She read the entire thread again. Then a third time. Then a fourth, more slowly, letting each word sink in. They weren't monsters. They hadn't said anything overtly cruel. They hadn't called her names or wished her harm. They talked about being practical. About aligning. About splitting things fairly. About helping their own families, which wasn't inherently evil. But they also talked about her health as a timing issue. A variable in an equation. About waiting until she couldn't manage, as if her decline were inevitable and useful. About nudging her. About reducing her suspicion. About getting power of attorney as a tool to start moving things in the right direction, whatever that meant. And then there was that phrase. She'll be less suspicious. Evelyn hadn't been suspicious. Not really. She'd been wary. Tired. Disappointed. But not suspicious. Until now. Now, suspicion arrived fully formed, complete, like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known existed. She took a screenshot of the entire thread. Then she forwarded the original email to her own email address, creating a backup. Then she opened her laptop, an old Dell that took 2 full minutes to boot up, and saved the email thread in a new folder she labeled simply Records. She printed the entire exchange, all 6 pages, using the aging inkjet printer Robert had bought on sale a decade ago. The print quality was mediocre, but the words were clear. She took those pages and slid them into the blue accordion folder where she kept important documents. The folder was getting thicker now. Life insurance. Deed to the house. Tax returns. And now this. On the folder's tab, she wrote in small, careful letters, Kids, money. Then she closed the folder and placed it back in the bottom drawer of her dresser, beneath her winter sweaters. She went back to the kitchen and sat down. Her tea had gone cold. The crossword puzzle lay unfinished. Outside, the gray afternoon was darkening toward evening. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the words in her head. We may have to wait until she can't manage the house. Her doctor mentioned her knee is worsening. She'll be less suspicious. Once we have POA, we can start moving things in the right direction. By morning, the hurt had settled into something different. Something colder. Clearer. More focused. She got up, made coffee, and called the hospice. She asked for Patricia, the social worker who'd given her Priya's name months ago. Hi, Patricia. It's Evelyn Park. Evelyn. How are you? I'm ready. I'd like to move forward with that lawyer you recommended. Priya Desai. I'll send you her information again. Are you okay? I'm fine. Just ready to get things in order. She hung up, checked her email, and there it was, Priya's contact information, sent immediately. Evelyn called the number. A receptionist answered. She scheduled an appointment for the following Thursday, 9 in the morning. Then she sat at the kitchen table and added a new entry to the black notebook. March 13th, received forwarded email thread between Daniel and Melissa discussing strategy for getting me to sell the house. They view my declining mobility as a timing opportunity. Melissa plans to pursue power of attorney by framing it as stress reduction. They have agreed to split the estate 50-50 without my input. She closed the notebook and put it back in the drawer. 2 days later, Melissa came over unannounced. She had a folder with her, professional looking, the kind with a label on the front. "Hey, Mom. I brought some paperwork I want you to look at." "What kind of paperwork?" "Just estate stuff. Power of attorney forms. It's really standard. All it does is let me help you with financial things if you ever need it. Signing checks, talking to the bank, that kind of thing. It doesn't take away any of your control, it just creates a backup plan." Evelyn looked at the folder. Clean. Official. Prepared. "Why do I need a backup plan?" "You don't," Melissa said quickly, too quickly. "It's just smart planning. If something happens, a fall, a stroke, any kind of emergency, you won't have to worry about bills piling up or accounts getting frozen. I can step in and handle it. That's all." Evelyn met her daughter's eyes. "What do you think is going to happen to me?" Melissa hesitated. Her smile came a fraction of a second too late. "Nothing, hopefully. This is just precautionary. I want my lawyer to review it first." Melissa's smile faltered. "Mom, it's completely standard. You don't need to pay a lawyer to review standard forms. I'd like one anyway." Melissa's jaw tightened. A muscle flexed near her ear. "Sure. Okay. Just let me know when you've had it looked at." She stood up, slid the folder back into her bag, slowly, deliberately, like someone putting away a tool they'd expected to use, and left without finishing the tea Evelyn had poured. Evelyn watched her drive away from the living room window. Then she went to the bedroom, pulled out the blue folder, and added the unsigned power of attorney forms to the stack. The evidence was growing. 2 months later, May now, the hydrangeas blooming in front of the house, she received a voicemail from Carl, her financial advisor. Carl was in his late 50s, methodical and calm, the kind of person who explained everything twice and never made her feel stupid for asking questions. He'd managed her and Robert's retirement accounts for 12 years. "Hi, Evelyn. It's Carl. Just wanted to confirm something. Did you authorize Daniel to access your account statements online? I see his email address was added to the online portal last week. If that's correct, no problem at all. Just wanted to verify with you first before we finalize the access. Give me a call when you get a chance. Thanks." Evelyn sat down on the edge of her bed and listened to the message 3 times. She hadn't authorized anything. She called Carl back immediately. "Hi, Carl. It's Evelyn Park. I got your message." "Oh, good. So about the online access." "I didn't authorize that," she said, her voice level. "I didn't add anyone to my account." There was a pause. "Okay. Let me double-check the notes here." She heard the keyboard clicking. "It says here the request came in by phone last Thursday. The caller identified himself as your son, said you'd asked him to help you monitor the accounts because you were having trouble with the website. I didn't ask him to do that." "I see. Well, that's concerning. The person on the phone was able to verify your account number, your social security number, and your date of birth. He's my son. He has access to that information from old tax returns." "Right. I understand. I'll remove the access immediately and flag the account for additional security." "I'm very sorry this happened." "It's not your fault," Evelyn said. "Can you make sure no one can be added without my direct, in-person authorization from now on?" "Absolutely. I'll put that in the notes. Is there anything else I can do?" "Actually, yes. I'd like to move my accounts to a different advisor." Another pause, longer this time. "May I ask why?" "I need someone who doesn't know my family. Someone with no pre-existing relationships that could be leveraged." Carl was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle. "I understand. I have 2 names I can recommend. Both very good, very ethical. One of them is Priya Desai. She does both estate planning and financial advising. Very thorough. Good with family dynamics. I'll take both names." He gave her the information. She wrote it down carefully. "Evelyn," Carl said before they hung up, "I hope everything's okay." "It will be," she said. "Thank you, Carl." She hung up and sat in the quiet bedroom, the sun slanting through the curtains, dust motes hanging in the light. That was when the last bit of softness she'd been holding onto finally hardened completely. This wasn't about her comfort. It wasn't about misunderstandings or good intentions or family members who cared too much. This was about control. Access. About counting her assets while she was still breathing. About strategies and timing and nudging. She stood up, went to the kitchen, and added another entry to the black notebook. May 18th, received call from Carl. Daniel attempted to add himself to my investment accounts by phone, impersonating my authorization. Used personal information to verify identity. Carl removed access and flagged the account. She closed the notebook, put it back in the drawer, and sat at the table for a long time. Then she picked up the phone and called Priya Desai's office. "I'd like to schedule an appointment as soon as possible," she told the receptionist. "We have an opening next Thursday at 9. I'll take it." She hung up, opened her paper calendar, and wrote Priya's name in the blank space. Then she underlined it twice. She didn't tell Daniel. She didn't tell Melissa. She didn't tell anyone except Linda, who came over that evening with leftover soup. "I'm going to see a lawyer," Evelyn said while they sat at the kitchen table. Linda nodded. "Good. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. That's why you talk to a lawyer. To find out what you can do. I don't want to hurt them." "Then don't. But you're allowed to protect yourself. You're allowed to decide what happens to your own life." Evelyn looked at her friend. "How did you get through this with your sister's situation?" Linda smiled sadly. "I watched her take control. I watched her stop apologizing for existing. And I watched her kids eventually realize they had two choices, accept her decisions or lose their mother entirely. Most of them chose acceptance. Eventually. And the ones who didn't. She said losing them was less painful than losing herself." That night, Evelyn sat at the kitchen table and thought about herself. Not about Daniel or Melissa or what they wanted or needed. About herself. About what Robert would have wanted for her. About what kind of life she wanted for the years she had left. And for the first time since Robert died, she felt something that wasn't grief or confusion or exhaustion. She felt clarity. Priya Desai's office was on the 12th floor of a glass building downtown, the kind of building that looked expensive even from the street. The elevator smelled like coffee and cold filtered air. The lobby had marble floors and tall windows overlooking the Willamette River, the water gray and slow, mirroring the sky. Evelyn wore her good coat, the one she usually saved for church, and flat black shoes. She carried the blue folder in a canvas tote bag, the weight of it reassuring against her hip. The elevator doors opened onto a quiet hallway with thick carpet and soft lighting. Priya's office was at the end, marked by a simple brass plaque. Priya met her in the waiting room. She was in her mid-40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a soft voice that made you lean in slightly to hear her. She wore a gray suit and small silver earrings. Her handshake was firm but brief. "Mrs. Park. It's good to meet you. Thank you for seeing me." "Of course. Come in." Priya's office was tidy. A desk is clear except for a laptop and a single yellow legal pad. Bookshelves lined with legal texts, their spines neat and alphabetized. Behind her desk, pinned to the wall with a pushpin, was a child's drawing, a house, a sun, two stick figures holding hands. The only personal touch in an otherwise professional space. "Please sit," Priya said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Evelyn sat. She set the tote bag on her lap, but didn't open it yet. She wasn't sure where to start. Priya seemed to sense this. She picked up a pen, pulled the legal pad toward her, and said gently, "What brings you in today, Mrs. Park?" Evelyn took a breath. She'd rehearsed this on the bus ride over, practiced the words in her head, but now that she was here, it felt harder than she'd expected. "I want to make sure my children are taken care of," she said slowly. "But I also want to make sure they don't treat me like a wallet while I'm still alive." Priya didn't react. She just wrote something on the pad and nodded. "Can you tell me more about that?" Evelyn reached into the tote bag and pulled out the blue folder. She set it on the desk between them, the label visible. "Kids, money. These are some emails I wasn't supposed to see," she said. "And records of some things they've tried to do with my accounts. And a notebook where I've been tracking their suggestions and requests." Priya opened the folder carefully, like someone handling evidence, which in a way, she was. Over the next hour, they went through everything. The house fully paid off, worth approximately $460,000. Robert's life insurance, $350,000, already paid out and sitting in savings. The brokerage account, $412,000, built over 3 decades of disciplined monthly contributions. Evelyn's pension, $2,800 a month for life. Her current expenses, roughly $2,000 a month for everything: utilities, food, property taxes, insurance, medical costs, small indulgences. Then they moved to the other documents. The email thread between Daniel and Melissa. Priya read it slowly, making notes on her pad. She didn't comment, didn't react, just absorbed the information. The power of attorney forms Melissa had brought and signed. The record from Carl about Daniel's attempt to access the investment accounts. The black notebook with its careful entries. Dates. Quotes. Patterns. When they finished, Priya leaned back in her chair and tapped her pen against the legal pad. Your children assume you're sitting on a significant amount of money, she said. For most people at your stage of life, it would be. The house alone puts you in a strong position. For them, though, it's not just security, it's leverage. It's something they're counting on. Evelyn nodded. They talk about my money more than they ask how I'm sleeping. Priya wrote something else. Let me ask you a direct question. Do you want them to inherit everything when you die? Evelyn looked out the window. 12 stories below, the city moved cars, pedestrians, the ordinary machinery of life. The river flowed past, indifferent. No, she said. Not everything. Do you want to leave them something? Yes, but not so much that my death becomes a payday. Understood. So who else would you like to benefit from your estate? The answer came more quickly than Evelyn had expected. She'd been thinking about this for months, turning it over in her mind during sleepless nights and quiet afternoons. The hospice, she said. The people who took care of Robert in his last days. They were so kind, so present. And the scholarship fund at the community college where I taught part-time for 10 years. Some of those students couldn't afford textbooks. I remember what that felt like. And the food bank my church runs in the winter. Every Sunday I see families lining up, and I know what Robert and I would have wanted. Priya wrote as she spoke, filling the page with neat handwriting. That's a clear direction, she said. We can structure this so your intentions are legally protected and impossible to contest. It'll take some planning, a few months, probably, but it's absolutely doable. How long? Evelyn asked. 6 months, maybe. We'll need to meet several times. Draft the documents. Set up the trust structures. Make sure everything is airtight. In the meantime, I'd suggest you keep doing exactly what you're doing. Stay vague with your children. Don't give them specific numbers. Don't sign anything they bring to you. And keep documenting. Evelyn nodded. One more question, Priya said, her voice softer now. Do you want them to know why you made these decisions? Evelyn thought about the email thread. About the phrase she'll be less suspicious. About Daniel trying to access her accounts. About Melissa's spreadsheet with the highlighted distribution scenarios. Yes, she said. But not now. Later. When it's done, they can't change it. Priya nodded slowly. We can draft a letter. Attach it to the will. It won't be legally binding, just explanatory. Factual, documenting the timeline and the specific actions that influenced your decisions. No drama. No accusations. Just the record. I like that, Evelyn said. I was an accountant for 29 years. I believe in documentation. Priya smiled faintly. Then we'll get along well. They scheduled another meeting for 3 weeks later. When Evelyn left the office, the air outside was cold and sharp, the wind coming off the river. She walked slowly to the bus stop, her hands in her coat pockets, and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not triumph. Not vindication. Not even relief yet. Just clarity. Just the sense of a path forward. Over the next 6 months, Evelyn met with Priya 5 more times. Each meeting added another layer to the plan, another piece of the structure they were building. In meeting 2, they created a charitable remainder trust. It was complex, but Priya explained it patiently. Evelyn would retain the right to live in her house for the rest of her life. She could even sell it and move if she chose. The money would remain hers to use as needed. But upon her death, or if she moved to assisted living, the house would be sold and the proceeds would flow directly to the charitable trust. From there, the money would be distributed 50% to the hospice endowment, 30% to the community college scholarship fund, 20% to the church food bank. It was irrevocable. Once set up, it couldn't be undone. The house was effectively removed from her estate, from her children's reach. In meeting 3, they restructured her brokerage account. A portion, $100,000, was transferred immediately to the same charities, divided according to the same percentages. Another portion, $200,000, was placed in a separate trust that would generate income for Evelyn during her lifetime, with the remainder going to the charities upon her death. That left approximately $100,000 in liquid investments, plus the $350,000 from Robert's life insurance. Enough to live on comfortably for the rest of her life, even with unexpected medical expenses. Enough to maintain her independence. But not enough to be worth fighting over. In meeting 4, they rewrote her will. The new version was clean, clear, and legally precise. Daniel and Melissa would each receive $10,000. Not nothing, but not much. They would also receive specific personal items, detailed in an attached memorandum: Robert's watch for Daniel, the family photo albums for Melissa, some jewelry, some kitchenware, and a few pieces of furniture with sentimental value. Everything else went to the charities. In meeting 5, Priya drafted the explanatory letter. It was 2.5 pages, single-spaced. Evelyn read it 3 times before approving it. The letter wasn't insulting. It didn't complain. It didn't moralize. It simply stated facts. It listed the date of the first conversation about the house, June 20th, 2017, 1 week after Robert's funeral. It described the escalating pattern of questions about her capacity, her health, her driving, her decision-making. It included a printed copy of the email thread between Daniel and Melissa, with key phrases highlighted. "We may have to wait until she can't manage the house. She'll be less suspicious." It documented Daniel's unauthorized attempt to access her investment accounts. It described Melissa's repeated attempts to obtain power of attorney, framed as concern but clearly strategic. And then it explained, calmly and factually, that these actions had led Evelyn to conclude that her children viewed her estate not as a legacy, but as an asset to be managed, and herself not as a person, but as an obstacle to be navigated. The letter ended with a single paragraph. "I do not write this to punish you. I write it so you understand that your words and actions have consequences. I have chosen to direct the majority of my estate to organizations that embody the values your father and I lived by: care for the vulnerable, investment in education, support for those in need. You are both adults with your own resources and opportunities. This is not a rejection of you. It is a protection of myself and an affirmation of what I believe matters most." Evelyn signed the letter, and Priya placed it in a sealed envelope to be opened only after Evelyn's death or, if Evelyn chose, during a joint meeting with both children present. In meeting 6, everything was finalized. Signatures, notarizations, filings. The charitable trust was established. The will was executed. The explanatory letter was filed with Priya's office copies. Evelyn's estate was no longer an open question. It was a closed plan, legally bound, documented, immune to argument or manipulation. They sat in Priya's office that final day in early January 2019, the city visible through the windows, and Priya handed Evelyn a thick folder containing copies of everything. "You're set," Priya said. "Your intentions are protected. Your estate is structured exactly as you want. And your children have no legal grounds to challenge any of it." Evelyn held the folder in her lap. It felt heavy. Final. "How do you feel?" Priya asked. Evelyn thought about it. Tired. But relieved. "That's normal. You've done something difficult. I haven't told them yet. You don't have to. Not until you're ready. The documents speak for themselves." Evelyn nodded. "When should I tell them?" Priya considered this. "That's entirely up to you. Some people wait until they're gone, let them do the talking. Others prefer to have the conversation while they're alive, to see the reaction, to provide context. There's no right answer. I think I want to tell them, Evelyn said. I think they should hear it from me. Then when you're ready, we can set up a meeting here. I'll walk them through the documents. You can explain your reasoning. It'll be controlled, documented, professional. Okay, Evelyn said. But not yet. I need some time to live with this first. Take all the time you need. Evelyn left the office that day feeling lighter. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Just lighter, as if she'd been carrying a weight she'd grown so accustomed to that she'd forgotten it was there until it was gone. She rode the bus home through the gray January streets. When she arrived, the house was quiet. She made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and looked at the thick folder Priya had given her. Then she stood up, went to her bedroom, and placed the folder in the bottom drawer of her dresser, next to the blue folder and the black notebook. The work was done. The pieces were in place. All that was left now was waiting for the right moment to tell them. That moment came 3.5 years later. By the summer of 2022, Evelyn had been living with her secret for over 3 years. She had maintained her routine, her independence, her careful vagueness whenever Daniel or Melissa asked questions she didn't want to answer. The calls and visits had decreased in frequency. Daniel called once a month now, usually on Sunday evenings. Melissa visited every 6 weeks or so, less often than before, as if she'd grown tired of the resistance and decided to wait for a better opening. The questions had largely stopped. They no longer asked about her will or her accounts or her plans. The conversation had shifted to safer territory, weather, grandchildren, work complaints, small talk that filled time without requiring depth. But the tension hadn't disappeared. It had just moved underground, a current running beneath the surface of every interaction. In August, Evelyn went for her annual physical. Her doctor, Dr. Reyes, was a calm, professional woman in her 50s who never rushed appointments and always remembered to ask about things beyond the checklist. They went through the usual routine: blood pressure, blood work, medications, mobility. Your numbers look good, Dr. Reyes said, scrolling through the chart on her computer. Blood pressure's stable. Cholesterol's fine. Kidney function is good. Your heart is holding steady. That's good news. It is. But given your age and your medical history, especially your husband's cardiac event, we should start thinking ahead. Not because anything's wrong, but because it's sensible to plan. What does that mean? It means making sure your affairs are in order. Advance directives, so we know your wishes if something happens. Medical power of attorney, if you haven't set that up. Making sure someone can make decisions for you if you can't make them yourself. I've done most of that, Evelyn said carefully. Good. That puts you ahead of most people. Just make sure it's up to date. Life changes. Situations change. It's worth reviewing every few years. Evelyn nodded. She thought about the documents in her dresser drawer. The trust. The will. The letter. All of it is current, all of it exactly as she wanted it. But Dr. Reyes was right about one thing. Life did change. And it was time. That afternoon, she went home and called Priya. I think I'm ready, she said when Priya answered. Ready for what? To tell them. To have the meeting. There was a pause. Are you sure? Yes. All right. When would you like to do this? Soon. Before I change my mind. They scheduled it for October 6th, a Thursday afternoon. Far enough away to prepare mentally, but close enough that Evelyn couldn't back out. That evening, Evelyn sent a group text to Daniel and Melissa. It was the first group text she'd ever sent them. She usually texted them separately, maintaining the fiction that they weren't coordinating, even though she knew they were. I'd like to meet with both of you at my lawyer's office. We'll go over my will and estate plan so there are no surprises later. Please let me know what date works for you. Daniel replied first, within minutes. Sure. When? Melissa took longer, almost an hour. That's a good idea. Transparency is important. I can make October 6th work. Daniel confirmed the same date. Evelyn texted back. October 6th, 2 p.m. I'll send you the address. Then she set her phone down and sat at the kitchen table, her hands folded in her lap, feeling the weight of what she'd just said in motion. Over the next few weeks, she prepared herself mentally. She rehearsed what she might say. She imagined their reactions: anger, shock, hurt, confusion, accusations. She thought about how she would respond, how she would stay calm, how she would hold her ground. She also allowed herself to feel sadness. Because no matter how justified her decisions were, no matter how clearly the evidence supported her conclusions, this was still the end of something. An ending she'd never wanted but couldn't avoid. Linda came over one evening, bringing soup and sitting with her at the kitchen table while the light faded outside. "Are you scared?" Linda asked. "A little," Evelyn admitted. "Of what?" "Of how they'll look at me. Of what they'll say. Of losing them completely." Linda reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You might, but you might not. Sometimes people surprise you. And either way, you'll know you told the truth. That counts for something." The night before the meeting, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, watching the shadows move across the ceiling, listening to the house creak and settle. She thought about Robert. About what he would have wanted her to do. She thought he would have supported her. He'd always been practical, unsentimental about money, firm about boundaries. Around 3 in the morning, she got up and went downstairs. She made tea and sat at the kitchen table in the dark, the street lamp outside casting long shadows across the floor. She thought about Daniel as a child. Serious. Focused. Always calculating his next move. She thought about Melissa as a teenager. Organized. Responsible. Always planning 3 steps ahead. She wondered when they had stopped being her children and started being strategists. Or maybe they'd always been this way, and she just hadn't wanted to see it. By morning, she felt calmer. Resolved. Ready. She dressed carefully. Navy blue dress. Flat shoes. Robert's old watch on her wrist. She took the bus downtown, arriving at Priya's office 15 minutes early. She sat in the waiting room, hands folded in her lap, watching the elevator doors, waiting. Melissa arrived first. She wore a cream-colored blazer and carried her phone in one hand, the screen dark for once. She smiled when she saw Evelyn, but it looked strained. "Hey, Mom." "Hi, honey. Ready for this?" "I think so." They sat in awkward silence. Melissa checked her phone. Put it away. Checked it again. Daniel arrived 5 minutes later, slightly out of breath, his hair damp from the rain that had started that morning. "Sorry," he said. "Traffic was brutal. I-5 was completely backed up." "It's fine," Evelyn said. Priya appeared in the doorway then, professional and calm. "Mrs. Park? We're ready." They followed her into the conference room. It was larger than Priya's office, with a long polished table and windows overlooking the city. There were 3 neat stacks of paper at one end of the table, each bound with a clip. A bowl of wrapped mints sat in the center, untouched. Priya sat at the head of the table. Evelyn sat to her right. Daniel and Melissa sat across from them, side by side, a united front. "Thank you all for coming," Priya began, her voice professional, neutral. "Evelyn has asked that we review her estate plan together, while she's well and able to explain her decisions, so everyone understands her wishes. This isn't a formal reading, that won't happen until after Evelyn passes. This is just a conversation, an explanation, so there are no surprises later." Daniel nodded. Melissa opened a leather notebook and clicked her pen, ready to take notes. Priya started with the basics. Healthcare directives. Evelyn had signed a DNR. She didn't want extraordinary measures. She wanted comfort care if the time came. Executor. Evelyn had named Priya as executor, not Daniel or Melissa. A neutral third party who would handle everything according to the documented plan. Funeral preferences. Simple. No viewing. Cremation. A small service at the church. Then Priya moved to the estate itself. Regarding distribution of Evelyn's assets, she said, glancing at Evelyn for confirmation before continuing, "We've structured a combination of charitable gifts and personal bequests." She explained the charitable remainder trust. How the house would remain Evelyn's for as long as she lived there. how, upon her death or if she chose to move, it would be sold and the proceeds directed to 3 organizations: the Hospice Endowment, the Community College Scholarship Fund, and the Church Food Bank. She explained the restructured investments, how a portion had already been transferred to those same organizations, how the remainder would provide income for Evelyn during her lifetime, then pass to the charities. Daniel's legs started bouncing under the table. Melissa had stopped taking notes. "So," Daniel said slowly, "how much is left for us?" The question hung in the air. Priya didn't hesitate. She'd done this before. "Evelyn has arranged for each of you to receive a fixed sum of $10,000, as well as specific personal items detailed in the attached memorandum. The remainder of her estate will pass to the named charitable beneficiaries." The silence that followed was dense, heavy, almost physical. Melissa blinked. 10,000, she repeated, as if the number might change if she said it differently. "That's it?" "Yes. And the house will be sold, as I explained. The proceeds will go to the charitable trust." "When did this happen?" Daniel asked, his voice tight. "Most of the structure was put in place in 2018 and 2019, Priya said, consulting her notes. The final documents were executed in January 2019. 5 years ago, Melissa said, looking at Evelyn. "You did this 5 years ago?" "Yes," Evelyn said quietly. "You gave everything away?" Melissa's voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp, hurt. "I didn't give everything away," Evelyn said, keeping her voice steady. "I directed a significant portion of what your father and I saved to organizations that embody the values we lived by. The hospice that cared for him with such dignity. The scholarship fund for students who can't afford books. The food bank that feeds families who are struggling. These are choices Robert would have supported. But what about us?" Melissa asked. "We're your children." "I know," Evelyn said. "You are. You're both adults with good jobs and your own resources. You have opportunities to build your own lives, your own security. What I have isn't meant to be a windfall. It's meant to reflect what matters." "So we don't matter?" Daniel asked. "That's not what I said. But the two of you have spent the last 5 years longer, actually, treating me less like a person and more like an asset. You've discussed my health as a timing issue. You've strategized about when I might not be able to manage on my own. You've tried to access my accounts without permission. You've pushed for power of attorney under the guise of helping me when really it was about positioning yourselves. I have documentation of all of it." Priya slid a plain envelope across the table. "Evelyn has written a letter explaining her reasoning in detail. It's not legally binding, just explanatory. You're welcome to read it now or take it with you." Neither of them reached for it. "This is because we tried to be practical?" Daniel said, his voice rising slightly. "Because we tried to help you plan ahead." Evelyn looked at her son. At both of them. "This is because, for 5 years, your first question has been what I have, not how I am. Because you wrote emails to each other about waiting until I couldn't manage the house, about me being less suspicious, about splitting my estate without asking me what I wanted. Because Daniel tried to access my financial accounts by impersonating my authorization. Because Melissa created spreadsheets calculating distribution scenarios before I'd even considered dying. You treated my grief as an inconvenience and my assets as your backup plan." Priya opened a folder in front of her. Inside was a printed copy of the email thread, timestamped and highlighted. "These decisions weren't made impulsively," Evelyn continued. "They were made carefully, over years, after documenting a pattern of behavior that made it clear you viewed my estate as something you were entitled to, not something I had the right to direct as I saw fit. This isn't about punishing you. It's about ending a dynamic that was damaging to all of us." Melissa stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I need air." She grabbed her bag and left the room, the door closing hard behind her. Daniel stayed seated, staring at the papers in front of him, his jaw clenched. "So that's it," he said after a long moment. $10,000 and some photo albums. "And your father's watch," Evelyn said. "And family heirlooms. And memories. And the knowledge that you still have a mother who loves you, even if she doesn't owe you her life savings." He didn't answer. "You could still change it," he said finally, looking up. "You could still fix this." "I won't," Evelyn said. "Because it's not broken." This is exactly what I intended. Daniel stood up slowly. He looked at Priya, then at Evelyn. You know what? Fine. Do whatever you want. It's your money. It is, Evelyn said. It always was. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. You could have just talked to us. I tried, Evelyn said. For years. But you weren't listening. You were calculating. He left without responding. Evelyn sat in the quiet conference room, the city visible through the windows, rain streaking the glass. Priya closed her folder. How are you feeling? Tired, Evelyn said. But done. That's normal. This was hard. Do you think they'll come around? Some do. Some don't. But that's not something you can control. You've done what you needed to do. The rest is up to them. Evelyn nodded. She stood up slowly, gathered her coat, and walked to the elevator with Priya beside her. When the doors closed, Evelyn rode down alone, watching the numbers descend, feeling the weight of what had just happened, but also, underneath it, something else. Not triumph. Not satisfied. But a kind of peace. The peace of finally speaking truth out loud, of drawing a line, of reclaiming her own story. She walked out into the rain and caught the bus home. The house was quiet when she arrived. Empty. Familiar. She made tea and sat at the kitchen table, looking out at the yard, the hydrangeas heavy with rain. And for the first time in years, she felt like the house was truly hers again. The fallout was slow and quiet, unfolding over weeks and months like a photograph developing in reverse, details fading instead of sharpening. For the first few weeks after the meeting, there was silence. No calls from Daniel. No visits from Melissa. The phone sat on the kitchen counter, face up, notifications appearing only from spam callers and automated reminders. Evelyn had expected this. She'd prepared for it. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were different things. The house felt emptier. Not because anything had changed physically, the same furniture, the same routines, the same light slanting through the windows at the same angles, but because the possibility of contact, the anticipation of it, had evaporated. Linda came by once a week, always with something: soup, bread, a magazine, a reason to check in without making it obvious that she was checking in. Heard from them? Linda asked one afternoon in late October, sitting at the kitchen table with tea. Not yet. They will. Eventually. They're processing. Maybe. You did the right thing, you know. I know. But knowing doesn't make it easier. Linda squeezed her hand. Give them time. And give yourself permission not to fix this. It's not yours to fix. Evelyn nodded, but she wasn't sure if she believed it. 3 weeks after the meeting, an email arrived from Melissa. Long, carefully written. The kind of message that had clearly gone through multiple drafts. Subject: thoughts. Mom, I've been trying to process the meeting with Priya, and I'm struggling to understand how we got here. I feel blindsided, hurt, and confused. For years, I thought I was helping you. I thought I was being a good daughter by thinking ahead, by trying to make sure you were protected and prepared. Maybe I was too pushy sometimes. Maybe I asked too many questions. But everything I did came from a place of love and concern. The charity donations, I understand wanting to give back. But it feels like a rejection of family. Like you chose strangers over your own children. Like we didn't matter enough to you. I don't know how to reconcile the mother I thought I knew with the decisions you've made. And I don't know how to move forward from here. I hope you're happy with what you've decided. I hope it brings you peace. Melissa. Evelyn read the email 3 times. She could hear Melissa's voice in every line, measured, professional, hurt but controlled. She wrote back 4 sentences. Melissa, I hear that you feel hurt. These decisions were not made lightly or suddenly. I have chosen to support causes that reflect the values your father and I lived by. You are still my daughter, with or without an inheritance. Mom. She sent it before she could second-guess herself. Melissa didn't respond. But a month later, in late November, she texted a photo. Just a photo, no commentary. Ethan at his school play, dressed as a tree in the chorus, his face visible through the branches, grinning. Evelyn saved the photo. She didn't reply, but she saved it. Daniel took a different approach. He called one night in mid-November, late, past 10 o'clock. Evelyn was already in bed, reading, when the phone buzzed on the nightstand. Mom? Yes. There was a pause. Background noise, voices, TV, the ordinary sounds of his household. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Are you at least going to tell us how much you gave away? Like, the actual numbers? No, Evelyn said. That's between me, the charities, and the accountant. Knowing the numbers won't make you feel better. You don't know that. I do. Because this was never about having enough. It was about wanting more. Another pause. Longer this time. She could hear his breathing, hear someone in the background, probably Ashley, asking who he was talking to. I just thought. He started, then stopped. I just thought we'd be set, you know? After everything. After watching you and Dad save and scrimp and never take vacations. I thought there'd be something for us at the end. You're already set more than most people in this world, Evelyn said quietly. You have a job. A home. Healthy children. Opportunities. I'm not a lottery ticket, Daniel. I'm your mother. He was quiet for a long time. Then, yeah. Okay. I have to go. He hung up without saying goodbye. He didn't call again for months. But life continued, quiet and steady. Every few months, Evelyn received updates from the organizations she'd supported. The Hospice Foundation sent a short report, no names, just numbers. 23 patients' stays subsidized in the last quarter. 1,742 hours of care was funded. Families relieved of $86,000 in medical bills. She kept those pages in a green folder she labeled simply Robert. The community college sent photos twice a year. Young people standing in front of bookshelves, holding textbooks with titles Evelyn recognized: Anatomy and Physiology, Principles of Accounting, Introduction to Nursing. The scholarship recipients were diverse, different ages, different backgrounds, all of them holding books like lifelines. One photo stood out. A young woman, maybe 25, dark hair pulled back, bright smile, holding a stack of books nearly up to her chin. On the back of the photo, someone had written, Maria. First in her family to attend college. Nursing program. Scholarship recipient 2023. Evelyn taped that photo to the inside of the green folder. The food bank organizer, a woman named Elena with tired eyes and strong arms, sent handwritten notes in December and June. These gifts came at the right time. Demand is up 40% this year. Your support means families don't have to choose between rent and food. Thank you for thinking ahead. Elena. Evelyn folded the notes carefully and placed them in the folder. In the ledger of her life, those returns mattered more than any number she could have left to Daniel and Melissa. She still saw them, but infrequently and carefully. Thanksgiving that first year was skipped entirely. No one suggested it. No one had the energy. Christmas was awkward. Melissa hosted, but it was clear she'd been pressured into it, probably by Ethan, who wanted to see his grandmother. Evelyn brought a casserole and a small gift for Ethan. Daniel and his family came late and left early. Conversations stayed surface level. The grandkids played. The adults avoided eye contact. When Evelyn left, Melissa hugged her at the door, but it was brief, formal. Thanks for coming, Melissa said. Thank you for having me. That was all. By the following spring, a rhythm had emerged. Not the old rhythm, but something new. Something cautious. Melissa texted occasionally. Photos of Ethan. Updates about work. Nothing deep. Nothing about money or the house or the future. Just small points of contact, like someone checking to make sure a signal was still transmitting. Daniel called once every 6 weeks or so. The conversations were short. Weather. Sports. His kids' activities. He didn't ask about her health anymore. He didn't suggest downsizing or equity or planning. He just talked, filled time, and then said he had to go. The tension was still there, humming underneath. But it had settled into something tolerable. Like an old injury that only ached when the weather changed. Inside herself, Evelyn found a different kind of peace. Not the peace of resolution, but the peace of knowing she'd done what she needed to do. She didn't worry about them waiting for her to die. She didn't worry about being manipulated into signing papers or moving into a smaller space to make things easier. She didn't worry about her last days funding a fight that would poison whatever remained of their relationship. She had done what she could. The rest was theirs to carry. One evening in late summer, 2 years after the meeting, Linda stopped by with lemonade. They sat on the porch together, watching the street, the hydrangeas blooming purple and full. "You look good," Linda said. "Better than you did 2 years ago." "I feel better. No regrets." Evelyn thought about it. "I really thought about it. I'm sad it came to this. I wish they'd been different. I wish I hadn't needed to protect myself from my own children. But no, I don't regret it. I'm not sorry." "Good," Linda said. "You shouldn't be." They sat in comfortable silence, drinking lemonade, watching the light fade. A car passed. A dog barked somewhere down the block. The ordinary rhythms of life. "They'll adjust," Linda said. "Or they won't. Either way, you're okay." Evelyn nodded. "I am." And for the first time in a very long time, she meant it completely. Now, sitting at the same kitchen table where Robert and I once balanced checkbooks with stubby pencils, where I sorted coupons and paid bills and planned meals on a budget, I think less about the money and more about what it revealed. If you asked my children to tell this story, they would probably frame it differently. They might say I became secretive, paranoid, that I gave away their inheritance, that I blindsided them, that I chose strangers over family. I won't argue with their version. Everyone holds their own balance sheet of hurt and expectation, their own accounting of fairness and betrayal. What I know is this. 5 years before that gray October meeting in Priya's office, I watched the way Daniel and Melissa spoke about me shift, from mother to asset, from person to problem, from someone to care for to something to manage. And I decided I would not spend the rest of my life negotiating my own worth in dollar signs. Quiet revenge, if that's what you want to call it, was not about seeing them shocked in a conference room or enjoying their disappointment. It was about reclaiming the ending of my own story. About refusing to let my final act on this earth be the thing that divided my children or turned my death into a payday. The charities will continue quietly, long after I'm gone. Some student I'll never meet will finish a nursing degree on a scholarship funded by coffee I didn't buy and vacations I didn't take. Some family will sit by a hospice bed, holding their loved one's hand, without the shadow of crushing medical bills darkening their grief. Someone standing in line at a food pantry on a cold December morning will carry home bags of groceries that could have been my grandchildren's 3rd vacation of the year, but became something else instead, became care, became dignity, became the choice to feed hunger instead of entitlement. My children will still have their lives, their choices, their work, their opportunities to build something that belongs to them, that they earn themselves, that no one can take away or resent them for. As for me, I have this house for as long as my knees will carry me up the stairs. I have my books, my tea, my small routines. I have my folders, blue and black and green, tucked in the dresser drawer, each one telling part of the story. I have memories of Robert that no amount of money could buy or preserve. And I have the knowledge that I made my own choices while I still could, that I drew my own lines, that I authored over my own ending. The will reading came and went. The world didn't end. The sky was gray that day, typical Portland October, but later, as I sat on the couch with my tea, a thin bar of late sunlight broke through the clouds and slid across the living room floor, catching the dust in the air, making it visible. It looked, just for a moment, like all the tiny things we never see until they drift into the light. Particles. Evidence of life. The invisible made visible. That's how I think of it now. Not as punishment. Not as revenge. Not even as justice, exactly. Just as a beam of clarity crossing a quiet room in a house that finally feels like mine again. Daniel still calls sometimes. Not often. Maybe once every 2 months. The conversations are brief, civil, and careful. We talk about his work, his kids, and the weather. We don't talk about money. We don't talk about the future. We don't talk about what I did or why I did it. That conversation is over. The papers are signed. The decisions are made. Sometimes I let his calls go to voicemail. Not to punish him, but because I don't always have the energy to perform the careful dance we now do around each other. Sometimes I call him back. Sometimes I don't. Melissa sends photos every few weeks. Ethan at graduation. Ethan at his father's house. Ethan with a new haircut. Never any text, just images. I think it's her way of staying connected without having to actually connect. I save the photos. I don't always respond. But I save them. We exchange pleasantries on holidays. Christmas. Easter. Melissa's birthday. My birthday. The exchanges are thin, performative, but they exist. We orbit each other carefully, like planets that once collided and now maintain a safer distance. I don't know if they'll ever truly understand why I did what I did. Maybe someday one of them will open that envelope Priya gave them and read the letter. Maybe they'll see themselves in it and recognize the pattern I documented. Maybe they won't. But I know this. I am 67 years old now. My heart is steady. My mind is clear. The folders are in order. The house is still mine. The hydrangeas bloom every spring, purple and heavy, leaning toward the light. And when I wake up in the morning, I don't feel like a number on someone else's spreadsheet. I don't feel like an obstacle to be managed or an asset to be liquidated. I don't feel like I'm waiting for someone else to decide what my life is worth. I feel like a woman who made her own choices while she still could. Who drew her own lines. Who authored her own ending. And that, more than any inheritance I could have left behind, is worth something. Robert planted those hydrangeas the summer we paid off the mortgage, 23 years into a 30-year loan. He'd come home from work that day, still in his paper mill clothes, and said, "We did it. The house is ours." We didn't celebrate with anything fancy. We made bulgogi at home, opened a bottle of wine that cost $12, and sat on the porch watching the sunset over the neighborhood we'd somehow managed to stay in. "What should we do now?" I'd asked. "Live here," he'd said. "Just live here. That's enough." Every spring when those hydrangeas bloom, I remember that. I remember his face. I remember the simplicity of that moment. I remember what enough actually looked like before anyone started measuring it against more. I water the hydrangeas every few days when it hasn't rained. I sit on the porch with my tea and watch the street, the same view, 27 years of seasons passing through the same frame. Sometimes Linda walks over with Biscuit, and we walk slowly around the block, talking about nothing important. Life is smaller now than it was when Robert was alive. Quieter. Less full. But it's mine. Completely, unambiguously, legally mine. And that matters. Last week, I received another update from the Hospice Foundation. The report said that in the past year, my contribution had funded 600 hours of end-of-life care for families who couldn't afford it. I thought about Robert in that quiet room, the nurses who moved like ghosts, gentle and present, never rushing, never making us feel like a burden. I thought about how we hadn't worried about cost in those final days, how we'd just been allowed to say goodbye. I folded the report and placed it in the green folder. There are 63 pages in that folder now. Reports. Photos. Thank you notes. Each one representing something Robert and I built together, redirected toward the things that mattered to us. When I'm gone next year or in 10 years or whenever that day comes, those organizations will continue. The Scholarship Fund will award another round of grants. The food bank will fill another round of bags. The hospice will care for another round of patients who are dying but deserve dignity. And Daniel and Melissa will receive their $10,000 each, their father's watch, their family photo albums, their specific bequests. Not nothing. But not so much that my death becomes a negotiation or a fight or a calculation. Just enough to say, I was your mother. I loved you. But I was also myself, and this is what I chose. I don't know if that will be enough for them. I don't know if they'll stand at my funeral and feel cheated or relieved or sad or something I can't predict. I don't know if they'll open that letter or throw it away. I don't know if they'll eventually understand or spend the rest of their lives resenting me. I only know that I did what I needed to do. What felt right. What honored Robert and our life together. What protected me from being treated like something I wasn't. The sun is setting now. The kitchen is dim. I should turn on a lamp, but I like the half light, the way it softens everything. Tomorrow Linda is coming over. We're going to drive to the farmer's market and buy tomatoes and maybe some bread. Small plans. Ordinary plans. The kind that fill a life without announcing themselves. And that's enough. It's been enough all along. I just had to protect it long enough to live it. Every story here will stir your soul. Welcome to Spice and Sugar, your daily escape into real emotions, bold lives, and unforgettable lessons. Here, it's all about love, loss, laughter, and the quiet strength that carries us through. I share stories that make you feel, that remind you you're not alone, that every bitter moment can lead to something sweet. If you want to laugh, cry, and see life through stories that heal and inspire, subscribe and stay a while.